Tonight, a peaceful town is shaken by an unexplainable explosion. A towering figure emerges from the shadows, and terrified residents are left questioning whether they've encountered something ancient, something supernatural, or something not of this world. Ciudad Valles, Mexico, was never a place of mystery. Life here was simple: farmers tending to their fields, children playing outside until dusk, and neighbors gathering for evening conversations. But that changed in an instant. What started as a normal day turned into something that would haunt the town for years to come. It began in the late afternoon around 5:30, when Mrs. Antonia and her husband took their child outside to play. The farmland stretched out before them, bathed in golden light as the sun began to set. Then, without warning, the air was split by a deafening explosion. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and from the direction of the nearby hills, a cloud of dust rose into the sky. At first, Antonia assumed it was a rock slide. Perhaps the unstable cliffs had finally given way. But when she and her husband turned toward the ridge, expecting to see tumbling boulders, their eyes locked onto something far more terrifying. Standing on the crest of the hill, partially obscured by dust and the fading light, was a figure. It was tall, unnaturally tall. At first glance, it resembled a man, but something was wrong. Its limbs were too long, its frame impossibly thin, and the way it stood, motionless yet imposing, sent an instinctive wave of fear through her body. Antonia's heart pounded. She grabbed her husband's arm, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "What is that?" she whispered. Her husband laughed, shaking his head. "It's probably just someone standing up there, a trick of the light," he said, trying to dismiss her fear. But when the figure moved, slowly, deliberately, his laughter stopped. The way it shifted its weight, the unnatural smoothness of its movements, was unlike anything human. He could feel it now, too. Something wasn't right. Without another word, he pulled their child close and ushered them toward the house, never taking his eyes off the thing standing on the ridge. By the time they reached their front door, the figure was gone. That night, Antonia barely slept. Every creak of the old farmhouse made her jolt awake, her mind replaying the image of the giant looming over the land. In the morning, she tried to convince herself it had been an illusion, a trick caused by the explosion and the dust in the air. But then she stepped outside and she knew something was wrong. The animals sensed it too. Their usually energetic dog refused to leave the porch, its ears pinned back, growling toward the hills. The chickens, normally loud and restless at sunrise, stood eerily still. Even the cows in the distance seemed anxious, shifting uneasily as if they too had seen something they couldn't understand. By midday, word had spread through the town. Antonia wasn't the only one who had seen the figure. Other residents reported hearing the explosion, followed by strange noises echoing from the hills, low hums, mechanical clicks, and, most chillingly, deep guttural whispers that seemed to carry on the wind. A farmer who'd been tending to his crops late into the night claimed he had seen something moving near the tree line, just at the edge of his property. "It was watching me," he said, his voice shaking. "Not like an animal, not like a man. It was studying me. When I moved, it moved. When I stopped, it stopped. Then just before it vanished, it made a sound, a deep, rhythmic clicking noise that sent chills down his spine." The rumor spread like wildfire. Some believed it was the legendary Bigfoot, an ancient creature rumored to roam the forests. Others were convinced it was something extraterrestrial. Perhaps the explosion had been the crash of an unknown craft, and what they saw was not a creature but a survivor. But the most terrifying possibility was the one no one wanted to say out loud, that whatever it was still here. 2 nights later, the fear turned into full-blown panic. Several residents reported seeing strange lights hovering above the hills. Some were small, flickering like fireflies, while others were massive, pulsing with an eerie, unnatural glow. One man tried to capture them on his phone, but the moment he pressed record, the lights flickered and disappeared. When he checked the footage, the screen was filled with static. The town was gripped with fear. People locked their doors, avoiding the hills altogether. But the true horror came when a group of young men, eager to prove the town wrong, set out toward the hills with flashlights and cameras. They never made it to the ridge. Halfway there, one of them stopped abruptly. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. The others went silent. At first there was nothing, but then a slow, rhythmic clicking sound echoed through the trees. Carlos turned to run, but suddenly something huge moved in the darkness. The boys screamed, sprinting back toward town. One of them dropped his phone in the chaos. The next morning, when they retrieved it, the screen was shattered, the footage corrupted. Whatever they had encountered that night was beyond explanation. But perhaps the most chilling part of this story, the government's sudden involvement. Just days after the sightings, men in dark suits arrived in town. They didn't speak to the locals, they didn't acknowledge the rumors, but they did something that sent a shiver through the community. They closed off the area near the hills. No explanations, no press conferences, just armed guards and restricted access. Whatever was out there, they didn't want anyone finding it. So what was it? A hidden species lurking in the mountains? A being from another world? Or something even more terrifying? Something the government had been trying to keep hidden all along? The truth remains unknown. The sightings eventually faded, the fear settled, and life slowly returned to normal. But if you ask the people of Ciudad Valles about that night, about the giant that stood on the ridge, they will tell you one thing. It was real. What do you think? Was this an undiscovered cryptid, an extraterrestrial, or something even more mysterious? Let us know your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life mysteries, because sometimes the scariest things aren't in stories. They're happening right now in places just like this.